Inflation is one of the most misunderstood forces in the modern economy. People feel it long before they understand it. You notice it at the supermarket, the gas station, the rent contract, the restaurant menu that suddenly has new prices taped over the old ones. It feels like the world is getting more expensive for no reason. But beneath this everyday frustration lies a complex chain of money, psychology, supply chains, expectations, and government decisions that quietly shape the value of your currency. Inflation starts with a simple fact. Money only has value because people trust it. That trust depends on two things: how much money exists and how much real stuff that money can buy. When the amount of money grows much faster than the amount of goods and services in an economy, prices rise. It is that simple and that complicated at the same time. To understand why prices explode and currencies die, we need to follow the story from the beginning. When an economy is stable, money supply increases slowly, mostly in line with population and productivity. But when governments face pressure, wars, recessions, political crises, debt defaults, they turn to the easiest tool they have: printing money or borrowing excessively. This begins a silent chain reaction. At first, inflation feels harmless. The government expands spending, central banks lower interest rates, and businesses borrow more. People feel wealthier because credit is cheap. This early phase is called the illusion of prosperity. Prices rise slowly, wages follow, and most citizens don't complain. But beneath the surface, the real economy is not growing fast enough to support this boom. The new money flows into assets first. Real estate, stocks, and commodities inflate long before grocery prices do. The people closest to the money, banks, corporations, investment funds, benefit the most. This is known as the Cantillon effect, the idea that new money helps those who receive it first before hurting everyone else. Then the energy shock comes, or a war, or a supply chain disruption, or a shortage in key materials. Suddenly, costs rise for producers. They increase their prices to survive. This is called cost-push inflation. At the same time, consumers continue spending because they expect prices to keep rising. This is demand-pull inflation. The two forces collide and strengthen each other like a snowball rolling downhill. Once expectations change, everything changes. Inflation becomes a psychological phenomenon. Businesses raise prices not because their costs rise today, but because they expect them to rise tomorrow. Workers demand higher wages to protect themselves. Companies increase prices again to cover those wage increases. This is the wage price spiral, a destructive cycle that feeds on fear. In normal times, central banks step in to stop the process. They raise interest rates to slow borrowing, cool demand, and bring inflation back to target. But when governments are drowning in debt, raising rates becomes politically dangerous. Higher interest rates mean higher payments on government bonds. Suddenly, the state itself becomes a victim of inflation control. Leaders hesitate. They delay. They hope inflation will magically disappear on its own. But inflation never disappears politely. It needs to be confronted early, or it grows teeth. This is how major inflationary disasters start. Let's look at history. In Weimar Germany, the government printed money to pay war debts. In Zimbabwe, the state printed money to pay for land reforms and collapsing agricultural output. In Venezuela, the government printed money to cover budget deficits after oil revenues collapsed. Different stories, same pattern. Rising deficits, collapsing trust, exploding money supply, and finally, a currency death spiral. In the advanced world, the pattern is more subtle. Instead of printing physical money, central banks expand their balance sheets. They buy government bonds, mortgage securities, and other financial assets. This injects liquidity into the system. It prevents recessions, but it also makes financial markets addicted to cheap money. When central banks try to pull back, markets panic, governments panic, and voters panic. So the cycle continues. But inflation is not always a villain. Moderate inflation, around 2%, helps economies grow. It encourages spending, reduces the burden of debt, and supports investment. The problem begins when inflation rises faster than incomes, or when people stop believing that their currency will hold value. Why do currencies die? Because trust dies first. Once citizens believe their money is losing value rapidly, they try to escape. They buy gold, dollars, real estate, goods, anything that is not the local currency. This mass escape increases inflation even more. Suddenly, every store changes prices daily. Every seller demands payment in a stronger currency. Every worker demands wages twice a month. This is the beginning of hyperinflation. But hyperinflation does not require printing trillions. It requires losing confidence. A currency can collapse even when money supply is stable if the public stops believing in political stability, fiscal responsibility, or economic leadership. The value of money is a collective agreement, and when that agreement breaks, the currency becomes worthless paper. The science of inflation tells us something uncomfortable. Inflation is not just about economics. It is about trust, psychology, geopolitics, and government discipline. Countries with strong institutions control inflation. Countries without them drift into chaos. There is another layer: supply chains. Modern economies depend on global networks of energy, metals, chips, food, and transportation. A single disruption can increase prices globally. The 2020 pandemic showed how fragile these chains are. Factories closed, shipping costs exploded, and shortages appeared everywhere. Inflation rose not because of money printing alone, but because the global system cracked under pressure. Energy is the heartbeat of inflation. When oil and natural gas prices rise, everything becomes expensive. Transportation, manufacturing, electricity, fertilizer, food, prices move together. This is why geopolitical conflicts often ignite inflation spikes. A pipeline sabotage, a war in a major energy region, or a supply ban can ripple across the globe in weeks. Inflation also interacts with inequality. When prices rise faster than wages, the poor suffer most. They spend a larger share of their income on essentials. The wealthy hide in assets that keep pace with inflation. This creates social tensions, protests, political polarization, and eventually instability. Inflation is not only an economic problem, it is a social time bomb. Technology plays a role too. Automation reduces costs, but supply chain complexity increases risks. Digital payments accelerate money velocity. Cryptocurrencies attract people who distrust central banks. In some countries, digital dollars are more trusted than the local currency. Inflation reshapes the entire monetary landscape. So how do countries stop inflation before it destroys everything? There is no miracle. The formula is always painful. Raise interest rates, cut deficits, restore confidence, and let the economy cool down. Governments hate these measures because they make voters angry. But delaying the cure makes the disease deadly. The final stage of inflation science is simple: stability is a choice. Countries that discipline their budgets, protect independent institutions, and manage supply shocks survive. Countries that ignore these foundations collapse. Economies do not fall in a day. They erode in small decisions, postponed reforms, and political shortcuts that slowly kill the currency. Inflation will always exist. It is the shadow of money. But its size, its danger, and its impact depend on human choices. Understanding inflation is understanding how societies function under stress. And knowing why prices explode is the first step to preventing currencies from dying.